Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today we're going to be talking about my favorite handhelds for each system. I've been asked quite a few times what my favorite way to play certain systems are, and I figured why not just make a video about it. So that's exactly what today's going to be about. And we're only going to talk about systems that I actually play. So if I'm missing insert obscure system here, then don't hate me for it, it's just not something that I usually play. So mostly today will be the popular systems. But first, let me tell you about today's video sponsor, UGREEN. UGREEN has awesome accessories for our handhelds, and they sent me over their Nexode 140 watt charger and their Nexode 65 watt 7-in-1 charging station. Looking at the Nexode 140 watt first, and what's really cool about this is just the flexibility of the ports for charging. You can use so many different combinations of a single 140 watt port, a 100 watt and 22.5 port, two 65 watt ports, or all three, since there's two Type-C ports and one Type-A port. A perfect use case for this is charging the Asus ROG Ally, AYN Odin 2, and any other retro handheld. You'll have max fast charging for all three. Or if you have one of those fancy MacBook Pro 16-inch devices, you can charge it to half in about 30 minutes. On the other side, the Nexode 65 watt charging station is an awesome desktop power bar. There's three actual AC outlets on it, two USB-A ports, and two USB-C ports, with a switch to turn it all off or on the back. Plus, the cable is 6 feet in length. You can do 65 watt charging on the USB-C ports, or 18 watt on the USB-A, and then it's split depending on how much you plug in. I've personally found this to be extremely useful at my desk for plugging in devices while I'm filming, or even just having access to easy AC outlets. Plus fast charging. We love fast charging. Check out UGREEN's Black Friday deals for up to 50% off. I'm a big fan of their products and I've been using it for years, so check them out. Let's jump right in with the handheld systems first. First up is Game Boy and Game Boy Color, and this is a fun one. My absolute favorite way to play Game Boy games is the Analog Pocket. Nothing else comes close. The screen is absolutely perfect at 10 times the resolution of the original Game Boy. The form factor gives you all that nostalgia vibe, and the entire presentation just feels great to me. However, there's one small issue, and that's the lack of retro achievements. So my backup favorite way to play Game Boy games is actually the Miyoo Mini Plus. For much of the same reasons, but the insane portability, plus just the absolute fun nature of the Miyoo Mini Plus, makes it one of my favorite ways to play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. Honestly, the Miyoo is just a joy to play on. Next up is Game Boy Advance, and this is a bit of a tough one. There's sort of 4 different handhelds that I love Game Boy Advance games on, and in no particular order, it would be the AYN Odin 2, Retroid Pocket Flip, Trim UI Smart Pro, and once again, the Analog Pocket. Now, the Analog Pocket is the weird one out, as it's a smaller screen than the rest for GBA, but it looks absolutely fantastic compared to everything else. But I think for me, it would be the Retroid Pocket Flip, followed closely by the Trim UI Smart Pro. That sort of gives you 2 wildly different budget categories to work with, which is awesome, but both make GBA games look absolutely great thanks to their larger screens and aspect ratio. The Odin 2 obviously does as well, and while there's absolutely zero issues playing those games there, I just prefer to use it for the more powerful systems, as it just feels a little weird using a bigger device like that for something like Game Boy Advance. But you definitely can. Then we jump into Nintendo DS, and I hate this one. Not the actual handheld itself, but just finding a good way to emulate it. The dual screens make it tough, of course, but I find that my favorite way to play DS games is my actual Nintendo 3DS, and that's with the R4i Gold Cart. I can use the dual screens, I can play any DS game I want, and it all just works. However, once again, no retro achievements. So my favorite emulated way to do it is with the Retroid Pocket Flip, and using Melon DS's standalone app for retro achievements, as I can show both screens side by side, and I don't feel like they're too small. Now, ideally, I would prefer to use the Odin 2. However, Melon DS is a bit behind when it comes to having the ability to upscale or improve the resolution of the game. Drastic has those types of options, but Melon DS doesn't. That means that the games look a little bit more pixelated on the Odin 2's screen due to the size, so it's not exactly the best of experiences, but it does work in a lot of scenarios as well. I should probably mention that I don't really play any games that require touchscreen, so for me, this setup works. But I think if that's a requirement for you, then the 3DS is probably your de facto option. For the PlayStation Portable, my favorite way to play those games are on the AYN Odin 2. Simple reason is that there's no compromises, and I can play any game that I want, and upscaled, and even with some cheats like 60 FPS for GN Arc. Everything just works and it's great. Before the Odin 2, it would have been my Retroid Pocket Flip, but even that isn't perfect for all PSP games that I've tried to play. It can get the job done for most, though, and I think by the end of today, you'll probably just want the Odin 2 anyway. For Nintendo 3DS, I'm not going to rehash a lot of what I said in the DS section, but it basically applies here as well. My favorite way to play 3DS games is still the actual 3DS. Nothing comes close to replicating that experience, and with no retro achievements to speak of, I don't have to worry about playing that anywhere else. If you wanted to emulate 3DS, however, then the best choice would again be the AYN Odin 2. Emulation is still improving, and it's not perfect yet, but you would have the best possible experience with that device and 3DS games. But also, if anyone in the Retro Achievements group is listening, can we please get some for 3DS? For the PlayStation Vita, I don't see a reason to emulate it personally, but I would once again go with the Odin 2 and using Vita 3K. The emulator is basically in alpha stage right now and still not worth it in my opinion. I also don't have a Vita anymore, it's been a long time, so this is sort of the odd one out in this list. Then we come to the last of the handhelds, the Nintendo Switch. This is an exceptionally easy one for me, but it's my actual Switch. I don't like playing Nintendo Switch anywhere except on my official modded OLED hardware, which still allows me cheats, save backups, and even sometimes upscaling resolutions or frame rate. While Nintendo Switch emulation is actually coming along nicely, and you could play a ton of games on something like the AYN Odin 2, which I did a video on 60 of those games, I just have no reason or want to. It's still just janky enough that I'd rather just use my Switch. Let's jump into the home consoles now. I'm going to combine a few into one section, and that's the NES, Master System, Genesis, Super Nintendo, and going to add Game Gear here as well, even though it's a handheld. I'm not sure if I have a favorite way to actually play these systems. They fall into a category for me of anything can play these and they feel great everywhere except on a data frog. Right now though, these games live on my Retroid Pocket Flip. The Flip because it's the device that I bring everywhere I go. It's not a 4x3 screen, so you have the black bars on the sides, but with how good games look on it, you quickly forget that. But I could easily play all of these systems on any other device, like the Miu Mini Plus, Retroid Pocket 2S, Anbernic RG405M, Odin 2, and so on. That Miu is really versatile, isn't it? For Sega Saturn, I don't really play it, but if I would, I think it would be on my Odin 2. Saturn doesn't play well on lower end chips, and it needs that power, even if the Odin 2 is probably overkill for it. For PlayStation 1, there's a ton of ways that I can and do play this. But lately I've really been enjoying upscaling it to 1080p and running it on my Odin 2. It's obviously extremely unnecessary, but when in Rome, you know? Otherwise, I'd likely just play it on my Flip. But a lot of people are enjoying PlayStation 1 on really anything, even a Miu Mini Plus. It's easy to emulate, and the only reason you'd need to change devices for it is for upscaling. And now we come to the point of the video where every system that's left is something that I play on one single device, and that's the AYN Odin 2. Of course. Nintendo 64, and I use RetroArch for it so I can get achievements, although not every game works. Upscale to 1080p with no widescreen hacks because I'm not a monster. Otherwise, you can use M64 Plus FZ for better performance and compatibility, but you don't get achievements. If that dev is listening, please add achievements. Sega Dreamcast is the same story, but I use the Flycast core through RetroArch for achievements, and again upscaled to 1080p. The upscaling to 1080p thing is going to continue for all the rest. And with Sony PlayStation 2, pretty much every game can do that outside of the ones with weird emulation issues. With Nintendo GameCube and Wii, you can basically set it to 1080p and forget it. There just isn't another device that does these all in the same perfect way that the Odin 2 does. Well, there is, but the Odin 2 is just better at it. For the rest of the systems like Xbox, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Wii U, I do all of those through Moonlight streaming from my Windows PC, which if you missed that video, you should check it out. I could absolutely do these on my Asus ROG Ally, and for most of today's video, you could replace the Odin 2 with the Ally, or the Steam Deck, and all of that. But as I talked about in that video, I find the Odin 2 to be a much better device for me thanks to streaming. That's basically going to be it for this one. I thought it would be fun to just take inventory of the different ways that I play games and where, and thought it would be fun to just share it with you. What does your list look like? Is it as confusing as mine is? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow, and hope you all have a good one.